price gouging, or should I say so-called price gouging, is not a bad thing and should not be illegal. When you look at the big picture and understand economics, there's nothing negative about price gouging really at all. In fact, it has many, many beneficial effects for society. But let me just run it down for you. This YouTube channel is not about politics. It's not about economics. If you look at my list of videos for Kekistan Lee, this YouTube channel is all about geek stuff. It's all about comics. I am a part-time comic artist. I've worked for Fantagraphics and Last Gasp and Carnal Comics and various other independent comic book producers. And I'm something of an underground artist. My most famous work is for adults only. And I'm politically a libertarian, let me just say that. But this YouTube channel is not about those subjects. It's about comic books and movies and geek subjects and having fun. However, I was watching the news the other day, and of course we all feel tremendous sympathy for the victims of the hurricane in Florida and for the victims of the hurricane in Texas, where there was massive flooding. I mean, it's an amazing series of two natural disasters that are just mind-blowingly huge back to back, and we all, every one of us of every political affiliation, wish the best for the victims and keep them in our thoughts and prayers. And let me just say that up front. And I certainly don't want to see them cheated or abused in any way. But I was listening to the news the other day, and I'm something of a news junkie, so I tend to listen to the news when I'm at work for hours on end instead of listening to music or something. And the governor, no, not the governor, I believe it was the Attorney General of Florida, was talking about looting. And she mentioned price gouging in the same sentence with looting. Looting and price gouging, as if these are two comparable things. Now, they're both a crime, according to statutes, because price gouging is mentioned in antitrust law. It's not mentioned anywhere else. But looting cannot be compared to price gouging. Looting is a crime that is entirely negative, has no positive effects for society, and doesn't fulfill any purpose other than to destroy the value of a store and loot its merchandise and steal. Looting is stealing from someone else. Okay. Price gouging, on the other hand, is just an inflammatory, emotional term for the normal function of the marketplace. Let me just say that scarcity and risk is always built into the price of every single thing you buy. I know that there's enough wood pulp to make plenty of paper. I didn't have to Google that or look it up, because the price of paper tells me how plentiful wood pulp is. If the wood pulp that they make paper from was scarce, then the paper would be more expensive, and the more scarce it is, the more expensive the paper would get. The only reason a diamond is extremely valuable is because they're extremely rare. Dirt is extremely common. That's why you can't sell it unless you're selling fine black dirt to people who don't have fine black dirt, to people who have bad soil. Then you can sell it, you see. But fine black dirt is scarce in areas where the normal dirt is hard clay or just poor soil. So you see what I'm saying? Scarcity is always built into the cost. Risk is also built into the cost. The more of a risk the producer has to take to make the item, the more of a risk the distributor has to take to distribute the item, the more they charge for it. The reason heroin is extremely expensive is because the consequences of being caught selling or smuggling heroin are extremely stiff. It's an extremely high risk. That risk is why the heroin is so expensive. If you could grow heroin in your backyard like dandelions, and it wasn't illegal to sell it, then it would be extremely cheap, wouldn't it? The scarcity and the risk is what determines the price of, they're not the only determinants, but they're big factors in determining the price of the things you buy. Now, the first reason, I'm going to periodically look down at my piece of paper because I've written down some basic bullet points here so I don't neglect anything. I don't want this video to run over a half hour by even if it runs extremely long, definitely not more than a half hour. So I wrote down some bullet points, and I'm going to periodically look down at this paper just to refresh my memory. There is no script for this ramble, but I have some points that I want to make. The first point is, the reason price gouging should not be illegal is that there's no logical place to draw the line. It's non-objective law, and there's no logical place to draw the line. Objective law would be speed limit. The speed limit is posted, you go over that, you're in violation, you're under it, you're not. Or murder would be another example of objective law. You don't get charged with just murder. It's either first degree, second degree, third degree, fourth degree, intentional manslaughter, unintentional manslaughter, vehicular manslaughter. There's all different degrees of murder. So they're very, very, very specific about what exactly you did to kill this person. They'll charge you, hopefully, with the appropriate category. Antitrust law is non-objective. Antitrust law is decided on a case-by-case basis. There is no specific percentage of raising a price where you violate the law. You can't say, well, if you raise a price by 50% over what you paid for it, it's legal, but if you raise it by 51%, it's illegal. There's no dividing line like there is with the speed limit. So if two different vendors in two different parts of the state of Florida raise the price by the exact same amount for the exact same item, and it's an unusual price raise that they don't normally do, the vendor number one, who gets the pro-capitalist libertarian judge who's in a good mood that day, gets off scot-free. Vendor number two, who did the exact same thing and got the Marxist judge who had an argument with his wife in the morning, gets the book thrown at him. And they both did the exact same thing. That's the immorality of having subjective laws that are decided on a case-by-case basis after you bring them into court. A person should have a reasonable chance of knowing whether or not they're violating the law before they commit the act. It doesn't mean that you have to have a law books all memorized in your head. That would be impossible. But you should have a reasonable chance of knowing whether or not what you're doing is illegal. And if they can't define specifically how much you have to raise the price to make it price gouging, then that's not giving you a reasonable chance to know whether or not your conduct is legal. Now, there is no rational place to draw the line. Why do I say that? The Attorney General of Florida mentioned a case, and you may have heard about this, that in Florida, someone was trying to sell a case of water bottles, which would normally sell for $3, $4, or $5, and they were trying to sell it through an Amazon online account for $99.99, in other words, $100. And the Attorney General mentioned this, and saying that this was definitely a horrendous crime, this kind of price gouging, and that should be prosecuted. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, yeah, that should be prosecuted. Well, no, that should not be prosecuted. It's completely irrational to prosecute that, and there's no reasonable, logical place to draw that line. Let's just say that the case of water, let's make the math easy. Let's say that the case of water bottles normally sells for $5, and he's raised the price to $100. Pretty big increase, right? Okay, so 5 times 20 is 100, right? So he's raising the price 20 times what it was, okay, if I have the math right. He's increased the price over 20 times what the normal retail price is. And since he bought the water bottles wholesale, he would actually only be paying half that. So let's just say that he raised the price 40 times. Let's be generous. Let's create a real example and say that here's this guy with this case of water. He's raised the price 40 times over what he paid for it. Well, have you ever eaten at McDonald's? When you go to McDonald's, did you ever get a soda pop, a Coca-Cola? Okay, do you know that I used to work at a fast food restaurant, a Jack in the Box, when I briefly lived in Arizona. And one of my duties was to pour syrup, Coca-Cola syrup, into the soda fountain. Did you know that the restaurant gets their syrup to make pop in giant, like 5-gallon cartons? They're really hard, they're really heavy, and they're really hard to wrestle up there and pour. Or maybe they were 2.5 gallon, but these huge cartons of syrup. They pour it into the machine. It makes like 1 million cups of pop. The machine mixes the syrup with charged water, carbonated water. And it comes out Coca-Cola, right? Well, that cup of Coca-Cola, counting the price of the paper cup, only costs the restaurant a couple of pennies. And what do they charge you for it? A large Coca-Cola could easily cost you $1 or $1.50, $1.69, $1.79. Large cup of Coca-Cola, 36-ounce cup of Coca-Cola, not be unusual to pay $1.69 for that. If their Coca-Cola costs them 2 cents to make and they're charging you $1 for it, then they are increasing the price 50 times what it cost them. Okay? The guy with the $100 case of water only raised the price 40 times what it cost him. You see what I'm saying? Now, if they're selling that large Coca-Cola at McDonald's for $1.69, which I think is a reasonable price that people would pay for a 36-ounce cup, then they're actually would be raising the price about approximately 75 times. So right away we're faced with a situation where a guy that raises the price 40 times what he paid for it on a case of water is a criminal, but McDonald's that routinely raises the price 75 times what it costs them on a cup of cola isn't a criminal. But wait a minute, if you go to a movie theater, doesn't a cup of cola cost you like $6? Okay, if you go to a movie theater and pay $6 for a cup of Coca-Cola that is half ice anyways, and the water costs practically nothing out of the tap at the movie theater, they make their own ice. Okay, if you're paying $6, then you're literally paying like 300 times what it costs to make it. The guy with the $100 case of water is only raising his price 40 times what it cost him. The cup of Coca-Cola at the movie theater costs you 300 times what it costs to make. And this doesn't just apply to Coca-Cola. All sorts of different businesses have these sort of items that have enormous increases in them. If you go into a vitamin and nutrition store and you're a bodybuilder, they have big plastic jugs full of protein powder. They sell you that plastic jug full of protein powder for 20 bucks. Would you care to use your Google button and find out how much it costs to make that protein powder to fill that one $20 jug? I don't know, but I'll bet if you Google it, it's significantly under 50 cents. It's probably under a dime. Okay, when you're producing that stuff in mass quantities. This happens across the spectrum on all sorts of different goods. There's all sorts of things that are routinely marked up more than 40 times what they cost. Okay, so why should it be immoral for the store owner to mark up the water 40 times, but moral for the theater owner to mark up this Coca-Cola 300 times? There's no rational dividing line there. And now some of you may be saying, well, we should prohibit the movie theater from marking it up that much. Well, great, but I love movies. I don't mind them marking it up that much. Okay, I love movies. And the fact is that without the snack bar, without the $8 bucket of popcorn, which is also marked up like 300 or 400 times, without the $6 Coca-Cola, a lot of movie theaters would go out of business. The movie industry just experienced one of the worst box office months in the history of tracking this information just last month in August. How many hundreds, if not thousands, of movie theaters would have gone out of business last month if they didn't have a snack bar? The snack bar in the lean months is all that holds it together. The profit margins in movies are not that high. And you can say the same thing about fast food. The profit margins in owning a fast food restaurant, there's a lot of overhead and a lot of liability. And you have to pay a lot of wages. And the profit margin is simply not that high. If they weren't allowed to sell the soda and mark it up 100 times what it cost them, if they prohibit it, let's say that there was a law that says you can, excuse me, let's say you had a law that you could only mark up things, say 3 times what they cost you. Well, now they're selling you the cup of cola for 6 cents. But the first thing that happens when they start doing that is fast food restaurants start closing. And when you go into the inner city where you have the fast food restaurant that's more expensive to keep open because you need to keep cleaning graffiti off the outside walls and because you need to employ a security guard because it's a high crime area and you need to have security cameras and all sorts of other expenses, the ones in the inner city that serve the poorest people would be the first ones to go out of business, along with the ones in the small towns. Okay, so do you want to say, oh, this pricing is unfair, so let's drive the fast food restaurants out of business by the thousands, and by the way, we're going to hit the small towns and the poor people the hardest? That doesn't seem very good, like a very good idea. Okay, and by the way, virtually everybody knows that pop is marked, that you get out of a soda fountain, is marked up this much, and I've never seen anyone protest or complain about it. There's never been a petition that the government should step in and do anything about it. So that's point number one. There's no rational place to draw this line. Okay. The next point is that price rationing is rational rationing. Okay. If the price is allowed to go up, then the only people that buy it at the inflated price are people that value it enough to pay that price. You literally can't sell anything for more than it's worth unless you're a government and you're compelling people to buy it. If a case of water is not worth, if I'm living in Florida, there's no way I would ever be in the position of paying $100 for a case of water, because I would buy my water at the regular retail price plenty early, at the first hint of a hurricane. Okay, I would probably keep a dusty old case of water in the basement, you know, for years, because it doesn't go bad. You just wipe the dust off it and open up the bottles. Okay, so I would be prepared. Price rationing is rational rationing. Rationing by government decree is irrational rationing. When government tries to manage from the top down something that is in scarcity, they always make the scarcity worse, okay, because they don't have the information to tell them, is it worth more to this person or worth less to that person. But in a marketplace, the people who prepared ahead and the people who heeded the call to stock up early, those people, none of them are even tempted to buy this water. The only guy that's out there spending $100 for a case of water is a guy who's made a series of horrible decisions and wakes up the day before the hurricane hits and realizes that he has no water, no pop, no lemonade, no nothing in the house to drink. If his sink goes bad, he's screwed. Okay, so to him, all of a sudden it's worth it $100 to get the water, because he's paying that price literally because he's being punished for his bad decisions. But the point is that he's making a decision on his own, looking at his own pocketbook, his own needs, and deciding this is worth it to me at that price. So it's not being sold. You can't sell anything for more than it's worth, because the person who voluntarily buys it has decided that it's worth that price. A rare stamp is worth nothing to me, but to a stamp collector it could be worth thousands, you know. A rare comic book is worth something to me, but if you don't like comic books, you would shake your head at the idea that you would pay more than cover price for a comic book. Okay, so moving on. I'm rushing through this. But you see, so price rationing is rational rationing. If the price of gas is skyrocketing, okay, what the first thing that happens is the people who really need the gas are the ones that are willing to pay that price. The people, the delivery drivers, the salesmen who have to drive a route, the people who aren't on a bus line and have to commute to work, the people that really need the gas are the ones that are willing to pay the higher price. The people who don't really need the gas, the people who are going to put the gas in a recreational vehicle that they're going to take out for a weekend just for fun, or the people that live on the bus line and can take the bus to work if they want to, or can't have coworkers that they can carpool with if they wish to, or could walk, the people who could walk to work but choose not to so that they can get up later. All those people are going to start cutting back on their gas purchases voluntarily when the price goes up. When the price rises on something, the people that don't really need it don't buy it. But the people that really do need it, like the salesman who needs to get out there and who makes all of his money off commissions and needs to drive that route and needs to hit up all of his customers, that person pays the higher price, because he'd rather pay triple for a tank of gas than not be able to meet his customers and earn his commissions, because it's worth a lot more money to him to be able to do his job. Sure, he's going to bitch and grumble about paying triple for the price of gas, but he's still going to get it, because that's what helps him earn the larger amount of money that he needs to pay his bills. Now, the next, I already mentioned that scarcity and risk are always factored into every price. That's normal, that's rational. But here's something you may not have thought about. Greed can have a very good effect. Okay, what will greed do? Well, let's just say that price gouging is completely illegal. Let's pass a law and say everything has to be sold for the normal retail price when there's an emergency or an impending emergency. Let's just say for a month before, from the moment a hurricane is first noticed till the time it hits landfall, you can't sell anything for more than the normal retail price. Well, psychologically, what effect does that have on a man that owns a store? Think about it. Is he going to stock up? He might stock up a little, but he's not going to stock up deep. When that hurricane is 5 days away, out on the other side of Cuba, the store owner in Florida is not going to stock up deep on supplies, because anyone that's ever run a business knows that you don't want your stock room, which is a very limited space, full of a bunch of stuff you can't sell or a bunch of stuff that you have to hold on to for a long time. The longer you hold on to it, the more you're wasting your storage space. Okay, the more you waste your storage space, the less efficient your store is and the less money you're making. Ideally, the stuff would move into your storeroom and then very promptly in a day or two move out to the shelves, out to the customers' houses, and be replaced by new stuff on the shelves, new stuff in the storeroom. That's the ideal flow for your business. If your storeroom is stacked full of a bunch of stuff that you have to wait a long time to sell, you have screwed up as a businessman. Now, greed changes that. If there's no law against price gouging whatsoever, and anybody can raise any price as high as they want, instead of going out and stocking up a little on water, certain greedy individuals are going to stock up a lot. They're going to take the risk that this hurricane might swerve and it might not hit their town, and then they're stuck with all that water in their storeroom. But that's a risk they're going to take because the potential profit is large enough to get them to outweigh the downside of being stuck with the water. So greedy individuals are going to stock up deep, and the more deeply the local stores are stocked, the less water needs to be hauled in by FEMA and volunteers from other places. You see what I'm saying? So it's good. That's good effect number one of not having a law against price gouging, is that the greedy individuals in town will stock up deep on things that they think they can make money on, even if there's a good chance that the disaster won't even happen. So you'll have more supplies in the area on the ground when the disaster happens if there's no law against price gouging. Another very good effect, if you have no law against price gouging, is that what the greedy person does. Okay. Again, excuse me, I'm sorry. Let's say you're a greedy person, you've stocked up deep now. Are you going to evacuate right away? You've got all this water to sell, and you raised a price pretty high. You're selling it for like 5 times what you normally sell it for, and you're happy. You got a line of people buying it. So, you're going to be the first one to evacuate or the last one? You're going to stay longer, even if it means risking your life. If you're a greedy individual, you will keep that store open longer because of the money you're making. But on the other hand, if you have just an absolute law saying that everything must be sold at very normal retail prices, then what you're going to do as a store owner is you're going to stock up very lightly, and then at the first possible opportunity, you're just going to close your store and evacuate yourself. Because why should you stay in the path of a hurricane if you're not making extra money? What, loyalty to the community? Pfft, pull another one, okay? That's not going to make you stay. Greed is a motivator that will make a greedy person not only stock up deep, but stay late. If there's no law against price gouging, the greediest store owner in town will be stocked up to his eyeballs in everything that you could possibly need, and he will be the last person out of town. He will keep that store open even at the risk of his own life because he wants that moolah. Okay? So greed can have some very good effects for the community. The community benefits when there's a bigger stock of supplies locally that don't have to be hauled in. The community benefits when the stores that are providing those supplies stay open till the bitter end. Sorry, that's my warning timer. I have 5 minutes to wrap this up. It's going to get over a half hour. Okay, so glancing at my sheet, what is the difference between, and also, what does fear, what effect does this have on the consumer? I can't leave that aside. If you know that there is a law saying that everything has to be sold at normal retail price, are you going to rush out and stock up your stuff early? They can't raise the price. So you might buy it early, but you might wait a few days. Okay. If you know that there is no law against price gouging, how will that affect your behavior? Well, I'll tell you how it will affect your behavior. If you are at all tight-fisted, or if you are living from paycheck to paycheck the way most people do, if you know that there's no law to prevent people from jacking up the price on you, then when you hear that first hurricane warning, you take your ass straight down to the store and stock up while everything is still normal price. So fear of higher prices also has a positive effect on the local consumers. In the same way that greed has benefits for the communities, when it's the store owner's greed, that benefits the community because there's more stuff stocked up locally, and because the store owner is going to stay open later to get rid of it. The local community is also benefited from the fact that the local citizens are encouraged to be responsible because there's a price penalty for not being responsible. Okay, and fear of higher prices, fear of missing out on the good price will drive people to go out there and do the right thing. And in fact, if you have no laws against price gouging, a much higher percentage of people will probably be permanently stocked up on this stuff all the time. Instead of waiting for the hurricane, they'll buy their case of water when it's on sale. Like I said, let it sit in your basement. You can wipe the dust off it 10 years later and still drink it. Okay, and finally, I just want to say, and this is kind of a complicated point, but is the price of water that you buy from the $100 case more or less than the bottle of water that FEMA gives you for free? It's a complicated, it seems irrational to even ask that. But the environmentalists are fond of pointing out that you have to factor in the entire cost of something. So if you're comparing solar power, for example, to burning oil, you can't. Solar power is more expensive per kilowatt hour to the consumer than burning oil. But the environmentalist will tell you, well, we have to factor in the total cost of burning oil. We have to factor in the cost of the pollution, the cost of cleaning up the pollution, the cost of this, the cost of that, the total cost, right? Okay, well, let's see the total cost of the bottle of water that FEMA gives you for free. And let's even say that FEMA paid nothing for the water. FEMA would probably pay wholesale for the water. They'd probably buy the water that they're distributing. But let's say the water is donated by some corporation. And let's say that even the truck driver that drives it into your locality is a volunteer. And let's say that the people that pass it out are volunteers. Well, does that mean the water is free? FEMA is a permanent bureaucracy. There are thousands of people working at FEMA, whether there's a natural disaster or not, and those people work 12 months out of the year. And they're poised. We pay to have these people poised to jump into action at a moment's notice. But there's a cost to that. Okay, there's a cost to the FEMA bureaucracy, and FEMA is not cheap. It's not just bureaucrats. They own trucks, they own vehicles, they own helicopters, they own all sorts of stuff. Okay, so FEMA is not cheap. So even if the water was donated, and even if the truck driver donated his services, which probably not true, FEMA's probably paying wholesale for the water, and the truck driver is probably being paid, and the person passing it out may even be an employee, but probably not, probably a volunteer. We would still have to take the total cost of FEMA and all their equipment and liability and everything, and divide it by the number of bottles of water passed out during the year to find out the cost of the bottle of water. You still have to look at the total cost. Okay, so even if the bottle of water is free, there's all sorts of hidden costs there. And if you're a taxpayer, you're paying those costs. Nobody else is paying those costs. It's you that pays those costs. So we don't even know if the guy with the $100 case of water is charging $5 a bottle, if we figure there's 20 bottles in a case. We don't necessarily know that a free bottle of water from FEMA costs you less than $5 a bottle. It might, but it might not. We don't know that. And finally, and I've got to turn off my timer here, finally just one more thing. The term price, people use inflammatory labels to turn ordinary economic transactions into things that sound scary and criminal and violent. The price gouger is just buying something and then raising the price to what the market will bear. That's the ordinary workings of the market. There was a tulip craze more than 100 years ago where tulips were very fashionable, and they would import exotic colors of tulip bulbs that would bloom in colored tulips from Europe. And some of these bulbs at the time were being sold to rich people for more than $100 a bulb. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but you should Google the tulip craze. Were the people that brought the tulip bulbs over from Europe and sold them for $100 a bulb, were they cheating someone? No, the people were willing to pay that because they were bidding up the price because they really, really wanted those tulip bulbs. Those rich people really considered them to be prestigious. So, you know, it's an ordinary part of business that you charge what the market will bear for whatever your product is. You know, this is why a plumber can come into your house and charge you $70 or $100 for the first hour, just for showing up and doing the first hour's work. And if it goes into the second hour, he's going to charge you more. Because the plumber charges what the market will bear. The tulip vendor charges what the market will bear. McDonald's sells you the Coca-Cola for what the market will bear. Saying price gouging is just putting a scary, negative, emotional, inflammatory label on something that is a totally normal function of the marketplace. Supply and demand, buy and sell, buy as cheap as you can, and sell for what the market will bear. Totally normal transaction. Just like scalping, ticket scalping. It sounds horrible, doesn't it? It's a horrible, violent thing from the Old West to get your scalp cut off. Scalping! But the ticket scalper is usually only selling something for 2 or 3 times what he paid it for. You know, I mean, it pales in comparison to the markup that McDonald's puts on everything they put on the shelf. And the ticket scalper, again, price rationing is rational rationing. So if you're willing to pay $1,000 to see the Rolling Stones play because you're a hugely rich Rolling Stones fan and it doesn't matter to you, you want to pay $1,000 for that ticket even though the original ticket cost $200. You know, I mean, the ticket, by allowing ticket scalping, we're allowing the people that are some of the biggest fans to get the ticket, whereas if you just don't allow any scalping, then whoever's lucky enough to get the ticket in that fraction of a time before it sells out gets to go, whether they're really a big fan or not. Price rationing rations things to the people who need them the most and the people that want them the most. And that's rational rationing that people are imposing on themselves. No one is saying to them, you have to pay this price. No one's forcing them to pay that price. They want to pay that price because they want that thing. They may bitch and complain about the price, but they want that thing enough to pay that price. No one's forcing them. So we put these scary labels on things and they sound scary and criminal, but really price gouging, ticket scalping, that's just normal marking up of things that you have bought low and you're selling as high as you can. And every business does that. They produce their things as cheaply as possible and they sell them for whatever the market will bear. It's normal. So I think laws against price gouging are actually counterproductive, but they make us feel good. They make us feel virtuous. We're condemning something that we feel like we should be condemning, and so they're unlikely to ever be repealed. But price gouging is actually a tremendous benefit to the community and shouldn't be illegal. Thanks.